Okay. Baruch Hashem. Welcome to the Parsha class Taam Dagan on Parshat Mikeitz. We're trying to see if there are lessons in food and eating in the Parsha. I think we'll find that in this week's Parsha, there's an overabundance of information and Torah regarding food, nutrition, economics of food, etc. So, with no further ado, let's share the source sheet, or the source, as it were. Tam Dagan, Parshat Mikeitz, in which the Torah teaches lessons about the effects of food on the economy, proper behavior and attitude during a famine, the importance of proper slaughter, avoiding drinking, and more. So, lots of topics. Let's just jump right into it. So we start the Parsha with Paro, the king of Egypt, having a dream. And of course, there's seven really nice looking cows, and seven not nice looking cows come out of the water, and they eat the nice looking fat cows. The way it's described in chapter 41, verse 2 is Vinei min hayor olod sheva parot. From the water came up seven cows. Now, usually in Hebrew, by the way, it would have said Olod Sheva Parot Min Hayaor. But as the Or HaChaim points out, that wouldn't indicate really how how much from the water these cows were actually coming up. They materialized from the water. That's why it's Min Hayaor Olod Sheva Parot. Yafot Moreh, they're very nice looking, they're edible, delicious. Vriot Basar, a healthy flesh. V'tirena Ba'achu. And they started feeding in the reeds. So, amongst the different comments, Rashi points out the people happen to be nicer to each other when they're not hungry and they have plenty. So that's already something very important to keep in mind. You have to avoid people becoming hangry. There is definitely a correlation between times of hunger and financial strain and violence. And furthermore, you can learn that it is important for a person to eat when one is hungry and to drink when one is thirsty, to avoid yourself becoming, in that category of hangry person. Hungry, angry has been combined into hangry. Yosef recognizes that this dream foretells food-related economic events. How does he know? Because Paro describes the cows appearing to come out of the Nile River, which is like what we said, which is not just a coincidence. It's the Nile, with an emphasis on the river. Historically, besides providing fertile soil for agriculture along its banks, the Nile served as a major highway through Egypt for ships carrying goods from one city to another. The Nile served the ancient Egyptians as an important resource for food and trade. That when kind of like when we think of a sandwich, we think of food, obviously. When the Egyptians thought of the Nile, they thought of food. The Nile and food were related to each other. So it's an important way to understand how Yosef interpreted this dream. Again, it has to do with food. A few verses later, when Paro is retelling the dream to Yosef, chapter 41, verse 21, it says, "V'tavona el kirbena, v'lo da kivau al kirbena." So when they've already eaten these skinny cows, had already eaten these fat cows, you couldn't tell that they'd eaten. They didn't change in appearance. They didn't bloat. Right? They didn't get fat. They stayed skinny. They stayed hungry. They stayed angry. So marehem ra, and they looked bad. Kasher batchila, just like they did earlier. V'ikatz, and that's when he awoke. So and of course here he's right. So he's retelling the dream, and he's explaining why he woke up. He woke up. It was a scary dream. The scariest part wasn't even the skinny cows eating the fat cows, not even the cows appearing out of nowhere, out of the water, like the Swamp Thing or something like that, right? For those of you who know 1950s B movies, um, this is this was exactly you know the scariest thing of all was the fact that these cows didn't change appearance. They stayed skinny. And Yosef interprets the skinny cattle remaining skinny as a metaphor for the 7 years of plenty being forgotten during the 7 years of famine. This is something that sometimes happens, right? Your life is good and great and everything's perfect, and then you have some stumbling, some difficulties in life. All of a sudden, you forget everything good. There is no good thing in the world. We're gonna. I know it's Hanukkah time, but in Purim, right, when we learn about Haman, when he sees that Mordechai isn't bowing down to him, he says, "I have nothing in the world." He tells his family, I've got nothing. Yeah, he's rich. He's one of the wealthiest people in the world. He's got a family. Obviously, he's got at least sons and a daughter and a wife who care about him. The whole entire Persia is bowing down to him except for one person. Okay, one person, but he doesn't have nothing. I'm using that word correctly here. He doesn't have nothing. He has quite a bit. And there's only one thing he's missing. So that's the same thing here. These cows represent to Yosef the idea that the poverty is going to be so bad, the famine is going to be so bad that people will forget the good as they are. They're going to be really, really good, really fat cows, right? So not being satisfied after eating is a result of food insecurity, not knowing from where or even if one's next meal will come. As the saying goes, and this is a saying we're going to repeat at least one more time in this class. It's a common phrase in the Talmud. It's that one with bread in one's basket cannot be compared to one without, right? So having a pot bisako, having knowing that you have food waiting for you is a very it makes a whole for a different kind of environment, a whole different foundational, way of thinking. So a few verses later, chapter 41, verse 33. Yosef is interpreting the dream, telling him that it's going to be 7 years of plenty, then 7 years of famine, and he tells him, "V'ata yarei paro ish navon v'chacham." Paro needs to find a smart, wise man, v'shitehu, and al eretz Mitzrayim, and he should make him in charge of Egypt. Now, this is very forward of Yosef. He is kind of asking for a job here, which luckily Paro gets the hint and he chooses him. But why do they think that they need to have somebody smart to do this? What are they asking for? They're asking for one person who recognizes that there's going to be these years of famine, and before that, there's going to be years of plenty. So, okay, so figure it out. Like, there's going to be a lot stored away. That's how scientifically difficult is that? It's not rocket science. Just store it away. The answer is wisdom can be defined as having the knowledge of how to preserve food, including what chemicals to add to keep things fresh, chemicals to add to avoid insect infestations. So says so who was that? That's let's see, 438. That's the Ramban. So based on that, it requires quite some knowledge to keep these preservatives and pesticides nevertheless healthy. Historically, in the 1901 Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, which was, by the way, huge. Buffalo, New York used to be sort of the center of American progress. Thanks, by the way, speaking of which, had to do with the grain elevators there that had to do with storage of grain, coincidentally. um, or maybe not. So in that exposition, somebody by the name of Willard Bigelow had an exhibit called "Pure and Unadulterated Foods." Bigelow's exhibit was made eye-catching by some brightly dyed flags, which were labeled as exemplifying the coal tar agents used to color food and drink. But perhaps the most pointed section dealt with the rising tide of new industrial preservatives. This is about 100 years ago is when our country started using a lot more preservatives in the food. On these shelves were not only food samples, but also glass jars and beakers containing preservatives extracted from everyday foods. The exhibit divided preservatives into undoubtedly injurious, such as formaldehyde, salicylic acid, and sulfites, and possibly injurious, such as borax and benzoic acid. It is claimed by those interested in their use that the amount of preservatives added to foods is so small as to be unimportant. But in this time of no food safety regulation, right? Small was left entirely to the discretion of the manufacturer. What does it mean, small? A small amount. Some foods are basically soaked in the new compounds. Or, as Bigelow put it, the amount added sometimes greatly exceeds that which is believed to be necessary by those who favor the use of chemical products. But aside from that, also, designing silos and storage facilities too requires knowledge. It requires knowledge. And therefore, Yosef recommends that Paro finds a smart man to supervise this era of plenty, because the silos and storehouses they need to build will have to effectively store the grain for a long time. I think that's the Or HaChaim says that. Yep. Keeping fresh is a challenge. Imagine, right? Since fruits such as apples and pears turn brown soon after being sliced, modified atmosphere packaging (MAP), often used in ready-cut bagged salads, introduces nitrogen or carbon dioxide into a container to reduce the amount of oxygen inside it, slowing the growth of unwanted life forms and preventing browning and wilting. Strawberries inside MAP keep for up to 2 weeks after being picked. Of course, whether or not this packaging is healthy or preserves taste and quality is another matter. There's evidence that modified atmosphere packaging destroys vital nutrients. In any case, fruits and vegetables that have come out of plastic packets tend to be far less delicious than those picked and eaten the same day. That's from a book called Movable Feasts. So again, why do we need a smart person? Because these foods need to be preserved. Not only do they need to be preserved, but they need to be stored. They need to be stored in something that's not going to ruin them. So all of that requires more wisdom than just put them away. Put them in the shelf. Even us in our homes, there's certain things. Some things are better. Some things are better left out. Some things should be kept in a paper bag on if you want to soften your avocados, right? Or some things need to be refrigerated. Some things need to be frozen. It changes. It affects the quality of the thing. What you do with it in order to store it. So that's just a little bit about that. A few verses later, again, he's giving advice. One second. This is why we do this, so we can correct this book before it's published, if it ever gets published. All right, chapter 41, verse 35. V'yikbitzu et kol ochel hashanim hatovot. All of that food from those good years needs to be not good year like the tire. From the good years from the years of plenty, all of that food needs to be collected. Habaot, they need to be brought. Ha'ela v'itzberu bar tachat yad paro ochel be'arim v'shamaru, and all the grain should go under Paro's hand. In other words, Paro should have control over all of the grain and the food in the cities, and then that's going to be kept v'shamaru. In the commentary, I think, yeah, the Ramban wonders why we're talking about food and grain as if they're two different things. So he explains that Yosef plans for the grains to be gathered and stockpiled. Other foods are to be gathered and distributed in the cities to which they are needed. Now you can't keep the fruit for 7 years, but so it should be kept and then distributed to the cities based on the needs of the residents of those cities. Chapter 41, verse 46. His advice is accepted, and Yosef rises up the ranks immediately. Yosef ben Shloshim Shana be'amado. Yosef was 30 years old when he stood lifnei Paro melech Mitzrayim, in front of Paro, king of Egypt. V'yatza Yosef milifnei Paro, and Yosef went before Paro. V'yavor b'chol ha'eretz b'chol eretz Mitzrayim, and he passed over the entire land of Egypt. Why do we need all of these different things that he's doing? So says the Or HaChaim that these are different things. Yosef is passing through the land of Egypt is to inspect the land, to inspect the quality of the land. What's going to grow here, the fecundity and quality of the ground. And not only that, but what already exists in terms of storage facilities. Are there silos? Are there grain, like I said, silos or water containers? What do we have? What do I have to work with? So he's traveling around Egypt. That's his first job, is to investigate and explore what he has already before he goes on to assemble the whole country to build more. Okay. 2 verses later, says what he did. Chapter 41, verse 48. V'yikbotz et kol ochel sheva shanim. He gathered all the food for 7 years. Asher hayu be'eretz Mitzrayim, all the land that was in Egypt, all the land that was growing during this era of plenty, right? So there's a whole lot more growing than they expected for these 7 years. Remember, these are the fat cows, right? In terms of how they are represented in the dream. Yitain ocha be'arim, and then he gave the food to the cities. Sorry. All right. Be'arim. Excuse me. All right. Ochel tzedei ha'ir asher sivivotecha, and the food of the field he gave to the cities that are around that field. Natan b'tocha, and he put it into those cities. So the commentaries explain Yosef does not gather all the food. Imagine if he takes all the food. It says all. All doesn't always mean all in the Torah, right? Because if it says if you really gathered all the food, then everybody would starve to death. He's holding on to their food. So it means he's all here. It has to mean that he took as much as he could without people starving, says the Ibn Ezra. Or, as the Ramban explains, he does indeed gather all the food. He does take it all, and then places every crumb under his control. You want food? Not a problem. Come get it. But it's coming from me. This is how he effectively takes over the Egyptian economy, as we'll see certainly by the end of next week's Parsha. Yosef's gathering all the grain either could mean he's taking a fifth, or is buying all the surplus that the populace does not require to survive. So this is the Or HaChaim explaining, really based on the word. Let me see if I can find it. 42. Oh, we'll see it later. But the word chamesh is possibly the shoresh for the word that's used for him taking the food. So it could be that he's taking a fifth of the food, 20% of everybody's food, so that they can have. Okay, you can have 80% of your food. That's a lot. That's a lot of food. But especially in a year of plenty, when everybody's getting a lot more than they need, 20% can add up to quite a bit for the future. All right. Okay. During this time, chapter 41, verse 50, Uli Yosef Yulad Shnei Banim. This is when he has his two sons. B'terem Tavo Shnat Hara'av. The verse points out, and this is what we're going to focus on, that this happened before the famine. Asher Yalda Lo Asnat, that Asnat bore to him. Bat Potiphera, Kohen On. She's the daughter of Potiphera, the priest or the Kohen of On. And Rashi says that the reason it points out, the reason it emphasizes, the reason the Torah, Hashem and His Torah emphasizes that that these children are born before the hunger is because one should not engage in procreation while others suffer hunger and famine. Right? We've learned a similar idea in the time of Noach, right? In the Teva, they weren't supposed to do that as well because again, people were suffering, people were dying. But halachically, Or HaChaim wants us to know that this only applies to Jews, only when others in the community are suffering, when other Jews are suffering. Obviously, there's famine all over the world. At least somewhere in the world, there's a famine all the time, pretty much. Mostly Africa. Let's be frank. And we'd never be able to have children if we followed this to the letter. All right. Famine starts. Chapter 41, verse 54. Chapter 41, in case you haven't noticed, is a very long chapter. Vatchilena Sheva Shnei Hara'av. 7 years of famine begin. Lavo Kasher Amar Yosef. It happened just like Yosef said. Vahi Ra'av B'chol. Bread doesn't grow on trees. But what it means is that because of the savings that Yosef established previously, the Egyptians still had food. By the way, the commentaries explain, I believe this is also the Or HaChaim. The famine is so intense that the people are not satisfied by the quality of the grain even before they start to lack food. So, in other words, what's the connection of the famine and in Egypt having bread? In other words, they had bread, but it didn't taste like bread. It was missing something. It was so intense. The famine was so intense that this lack of really food security, this not knowing that if you're going to eat tomorrow, made it so that it felt like it was a famine even when they had food. I mean, obviously they were alive. They were alive to feel this, but they felt hungry even before they were. Chapter 41, verse 56. The famine was all over the land. V'yiftach Yosef et kol asher bahem, and Yosef opened up all that he had. V'yishbol Mitzrayim, and he sold things to the Egyptians. V'yechazak harav, and then the famine got even worse. Be'eretz Mitzrayim, in the land of Egypt. So the commentaries explain. Let's start with the Ramban, that people complain about hunger even when they still have a little food because they start to panic. We've been saying this already. Another reason Yosef opens all the storehouses. Right? What's your commentary? We're saying he opened up everything. V'yiftach Yosef et kol asher b'hem. All of them. You open up everything. Why you don't open up one per city, whatever. All of them you have to open. So he opened up all of them because psychologically people are less hungry when they're under the impression that they can eat when they want. And we said this before. As we said from the sages, there's no comparing someone with bread in one's basket to somebody without. Right? When you have bread, you know you have food that's waiting for you. It changes your perspective. Now, he doesn't sell everything all at once. And the Or HaChaim explains that there's a very important economic reason for all of this. He wants to make sure that he's cornered the market, that he's in control of the market. Why? Because limiting the amount of grain people could purchase benefits both Egypt's economy because their monopoly helps them control the prices, and it helps the buyers because they can be confident that no middlemen affect the prices. So everybody wins when there's a controlled, let's call it a controlled monopoly, right? You know what the price is going to be. There's no surprises, and at the same time, nobody's out there trying to affect or change things around for their own benefit. That was all chapter 41. Let's get to chapter 42. Chapter 42, we're finally back in Israel. We're introduced to Yaakov and his sons. And what you're going to see is one of the most difficult things about this Parsha, in terms of Pshat, is understanding how hungry Yaakov and his family were. Because as we'll see very shortly, the rabbis in the Talmud don't think that there's a famine in Israel. So if there's no famine in Israel, why is Yaakov sending his sons? And there's verse after verse saying they're going to go hungry. They're not going to live without the food. They should send them so they could live and not die. And all kinds of other uses of language in the Torah, in the Parsha. So all of that is going to make it so to reading this parsha becomes a challenge. Let's call it. Oh, let's do it. Let's go through it together and see how much we can understand. But at least keep that in the sort of in the background while we're going through it. So chapter 42, verse 1. V'yar Yaakov ki yesh shever b'Mitzrayim. Yaakov saw that there was grain, let's call it, in Egypt. V'yomer Yaakov levanav lama titra'u. Why are you looking? Why do you look at each other? All kinds of different translations of what titra'u means. Definitely means looking. Why are you looking suspicious? Why are you looking at each other? Why are you not doing anything? Right? So according to Chazal, as I just said, and this is in the Gemara in Ta'anit 10b, Yaakov and his family are not suffering from the famine because they have food to eat and are trying to prevent. So what? Why is he asking for food to be brought? Because he's trying to prevent passing travelers from being jealous of them. According to Ramban, it's passing travelers, right? Um, Another reason is that these travelers would ask to be taken in as guests and deplete their resources, or perhaps just be bad influences on their family. So if you're hungry and you're walking past the place where everybody's just eating and having a great time, having a barbecue, you might invite yourself over. So that's what Yaakov was trying to prevent and that's why he sent his sons to Egypt. Next verse, chapter 42, verse 2. Chapter, by the way, 42 is also quite long. Just so you know. Vayomer, hine shamati. I heard ki yeshever b'Mitzrayim, that there's food in Egypt, there's grain in Egypt. Rudu shama, go down there. V'shiver lanu misham, and buy some from there. V'nichya v'lo namut, so that we can live and not die. So again, he's not going to die. He's not hungry. So what's this verse talking about? So to be clear, one moment. Okay. You hear me? Am I back on? Yeah?
One second. Yeah,
Benji, you hear me?
Yep.
Loud and
All right,
clear.
all right, good. Baruch Hashem. All right, back to this. So he said, so to be clear that they should only buy the foods necessary for survival, Yaakov tells his sons that their mission is to provide food so that we live and not die. One should not eat luxuriously while others around them suffer from famine. This is a lesson from Hamek Davar, the Netziv. To live and not die could also mean that they would deserve to be punished in the afterlife for their lack of effort in saving themselves from hunger. This is the Or HaChaim. Again, it definitely seems, according to the Or HaChaim, that the Pashut Pshat is that they are afraid of being hungry. Not like the Gemara, which I'm not. He's not arguing with the Gemara, but it's certainly it's certainly hard to read that into the Pashut Pshat. Anyway, back into the simple explanation. All right. Alternatively, living means subsisting on the basic nutritional necessities, whereas not dying refers to not having enough food, to having enough food to not die of hunger altogether. And that's from the Or HaChaim again. Next verse, chapter 42, verse 3. Give him the class. V'yerdu ache Yosef Asara, and his brothers, the brothers of Yosef, went down. Lishbor bar mimitzrayim. They went down to buy grain from Egypt. That's it. That's the big move. That's what all of this was pointing towards. The whole long chapter 41 is all about getting these brothers to go down to Egypt. And by the way, it's worth pointing out, as the Or HaChaim does, that these are brothers, and they're called brothers of Yosef. That's why they went there. They went there with the plan of finding Yosef and bringing him back. Hashem in his Torah emphasizes that the brothers go together because people during famine act more violently, as we said before, and brothers stay together to provide, and the brothers stay together to provide each other with safety and security. They should stick together for just practical reasons. It's not safe. There's a power in numbers, right? Okay, chapter 42, verse 25. Let's get back to the food. So they are captured, and they're accused of being spies. They say, "No, we're not spies. We're brothers." And they give the whole backstory. They explain that they might be looking for their brother, and so he says. So he, according to Or HaChaim, Paro says, "Okay, oh, look, you just admitted it. You are spies. You are spying for something. You're looking for something. You're not just here for grain. You're here for one of my citizens to give up one of their slaves. And what are you going to do if he says no? You're going to start a fight with them? That's exactly why you should be in prison." So they say no. We're all brothers of one man. We have another brother waiting for us. Oh, you have another brother. You should bring him too. No, we're not going to bring him. This is the whole back and forth. And he finally says, "Okay, I'm gonna arrest one of you, and the rest of you can go and get your other brother, and otherwise, don't come back at all." V'itzav Yosef v'yimalu et belehem bar, and he commands his servants to put into their into whatever they brought to get the grain, to fill those up with grain. Lahashiv pas kaspehem ish el sako. So all of their money is going to go back into their sacks. V'atet lahem tzeda laderech, and to also give them food for the road. V'yas lahem kain, and that's what was done. So just a side point. I think this is from Rav Hirsch, that tzeda is not just regular food; it's always food for the future. It's it's food that's for not for now. It's for the journey. It's for, to I don't even know the English word for it. Provisions maybe. It's not food to be eaten as a meal. It's food, to tide you over. So that's an important comment. Short comment. Now we're going to see this comment pops up twice in our parsha as well, but from different commentaries actually. Chapter 42, verse 27. V'yiftach ha'echad et sako. One of them opens up his bag. They're leaving. They're expecting their money to be depleted. They'd already paid for everything. Take mispo lechamoro. He wanted to feed his donkey, b'malon, in wherever they're staying. V'yar, and he saw at kaspo. He saw his money. Hinehu b'fi am tachto. He saw his money was in the mouth of his sack. So the commentary, the Call of the Torah, points out that this is Levi feeding his donkey, and he's the one who finds this money. And it's just interesting that he's feeding his donkey before he feeds himself. We're going to see this quite a bit. Like I said, we've seen it already with Rivka during Eliezer's test. That she took care of the camels before she took care of the people. Because that's a halacha. You're supposed to feed your animals before you eat. It's not. I mean, it's. Imagine you got hungry animals all around you watching you eat. It's not right. All right. Next chapter, third chapter of our parsha. They go back. They go back to Yaakov. They tell Yaakov they need to go back with Binyamin. Yaakov says, ain't gonna happen over my dead body, almost literally. And and uh and so now the brothers don't know what to do. They can't convince him. And then finally, chapter 43, verse 2, Vahika kilu echol et shever. When all of the food, all the grain that they had brought was eaten up, that they brought from Egypt, Vayomer alehem avihem shuvu shivru lanu ma'at ochel. Go and get us a little bit of food. Yaakov, Ishkoyach. We've got to go get a little bit of food. Besides that, we have a problem. Before we get to that question, let's go back a second. When all of the shever was eaten, what how can we understand this in the way that fits with Chazal? So there are ways you could say as the Or Chaim says, as we'll see here, that it's not that we're not talking about that they ate all of their food. They ate all of the food that they brought that they needed for their trip back. If this tzeda, if this food was going to be used for their trip back, they'd eaten. They were dangerously close to getting to that. So Yaakov tells his sons to return to Egypt for specifically a little food, since they never really needed food, as they're safe from famine. They're eating up the grain. Refers to they're eating the grain they required for the return trip to Egypt. On a sort of drush level, not in fitting with the Parsha shot at all, but just so you know, I believe it was just the original Rebbe, yeah, the original Rebbe once said that this verse can be applied to teshuva because teshuva is a spiritual return to Hashem. If one desires to regain one's relationship with spirituality and Hashem, one should acquire the characteristic of eating a little food, right? That's ma'at ochel. That's what that means, right? Eat a small, healthy quantity of food, not overeating, not overindulging yourself in the physical pleasures of the world. Focus on the spiritual pleasures of this world, like that. Okay, chapter 43, verse 11. So finally, he's convinced. Vayomer alehem Yisrael avihem im kain efo zot asu. If he says to them, if this is what you got to do, then this is what you're going to do, right? I guess you have to take Binyamin. So do it like this. Ku mizimrat haaretz bichlehem. Bring from the best of the land in your vessels. V'heridu leish mincha, and give the man a mincha, a gift, right? Ma'at tsari, ma'at devash, nochot valot, batni mushkedim. So bring him a little bit of balm, a little bit of honey, wax, lotus, pistachios, and almonds. Now you might have noticed that if these are the best of the land, we don't really hear too much about this anywhere else in Tanakh. Nowhere else is the land known as the land of milk and wax. Okay, so honey, yes. Okay, but the land of pistachios and almonds, you don't hear that kind of thing. So we have to understand why these are the fruits that he chose to bring. The Gemara in Bava Batra 91a tells us that it is forbidden to export wine or oil from Eretz Yisrael. How that fits in with halacha nowadays, I'm not going to get into it. Therefore, Yaakov sends the Egyptian ruler, who is Yosef, that's some balsam, some honey, wax, lotus, and pistachio and almonds, but not grapes or olives. He chooses to only send a little because such is the custom when sending gifts to those who are wealthy and lack nothing. Now, you don't bring like, have to, honor, have to honor, the king, have to bring him a, big, table full of stuff. No, just bring a little bit because it's understood by the guest and by the host that this is just a token gift. I mean, they're not expecting you to feed them. They don't need to be fed. Who said that? That was a Sforno. Okay. Due to the famine, the other crops failed, and these can be stored for a long time. So now, again, we're back to the idea of storage. These foods, again, wax, honey, pistachios, almonds, they can last for a long time in storage. And remember, there's a famine, so this is what they had, says Rav Hirsch. And they took the oils rather than the nuts, according to the Midrash in Bereshit Rabbah 91:13, because the fruits have already been eaten long before. Also, in case the Egyptians are suspicious, this is a little bit this is a little heady. Let's think about this one together. In case the Egyptians are suspicious that it has taken the brothers a long time to return, and that perhaps they're using this extra time to find someone to stand in as their allegedly fake brother, they're looking for an actor to play the part of Binyamin, maybe. So that's why Yaakov tells them to take these fruits, because they're fresh now. This is their season. And so this is going to be your excuse to why it took you so long. You're waiting for the pistachios to get ripe. You're waiting for, for the you're waiting for the lotus to start growing and be ready to eat, or whatever people do with lotus. Right. So that's another explanation. I think that's the Maril Diskin as it is. Okay. Baruch Hashem. Chapter 43, verse 16. All right. So they come. They bring him this big gift, right? So we're getting towards like the end of the story at this point. But yeah, Yosef itam. Yosef saw them at Binyamin. He saw Binyamin. Vayomer, and he said, "Share al beito." He said to the person who's a steward, the person in charge of his house, "Have et hanashim habaita." Bring these men into the house. V'tavoach tevach v'hachein, and prepare for them meat. Ki iti yochlu hanashim b'tzaraim. I'm going to eat with these men during at noon. It's worth pointing out, if you don't mind, since it is the fifth night of Hanukkah, that these letters, the last letter, the last chet in Tevach, and the word v'hachein, not just has the gematria of Hanukkah, has all the letters of Hanukkah, a chet, a vav, a hey, a chaf, and a nun, mixed around, spells out Hanukkah. It's one of the, I think, the Rokeach's hints to Hanukkah in Parsha Mikeitz, which is usually read on Hanukkah. Very, very, very rarely, I think a couple of years ago, but very rarely is Mikeitz not on Hanukkah. So that's why there's a lot of connections. Besides, there's thematical connections. Also, I'm sure you'll hear that at your local shul at the rabbi's drasha on Shabbat. Anyway, so he tells them to get this food ready, and to prepare the meat, etc. Yosef has his steward prepare the meat for his brothers in accordance with Torah law, says the Gemara in Chulin 85b. He's shechting the meat. He's taking out the Gid Hanasha, whatever else needs to be done. The sages present an opinion that Yaakov's children are not allowed to eat Gid Hanasha even before the Torah is given. Second. This is why we do this. The brothers could eat the meat slaughtered by Egyptians because there's an opinion, it's the Rambam, that Jews may eat meat slaughtered by non-Jews if they are clearly not idol worshippers. Right? In other words, they're non-Jews, they're not Jews. Obviously, non-Jews are not Jews. But they're also not idol worshippers. They might believe in one God. They might not believe in God at all, or whatever. None of our business. But if they don't believe in idols, they don't worship idols. According to the Rambam, they are allowed to shecht meat for you. By the way, not the halacha today. Don't look for your average non-Jew to shecht for you. But that is the Rambam's opinion. So based on that, the Rav Chaim Kanievsky points out that Jews may eat meat slaughtered by non-Jews if they're clearly not idol worshippers, according to that opinion. Therefore, when Yosef tells his brothers that he is God-fearing, as he did earlier, he demonstrates that he is in that category of Gentile whose slaughter may be reliable. All right, so we keep going. 8 verses later, chapter 43, verse 24. Again, and I said we'd have this. We had a similar comment like this earlier. That man brought brought the brothers into Yosef's house. He gave them water so they could wash their feet. And he gave food to their donkeys. Again, they're feeding the donkeys. They're not eating yet. Again, the concept is to give food to donkeys, to give food to your animals before you feed people, before you eat yourself. That's Oznaim Latorah points it out there. Okay, next verse, chapter 43, verse 25. So, v'yachinu et hamincha, they prepare this mincha, this gift. That's the pistachios, the almonds, and all that stuff, right? Ad bo Yosef b'tzarayim, until Yosef arrives at noon. Kishamu kisham yochlu lachem, because they heard that they're going to be eating bread there. These gifts are called a mincha. They're preparing a mincha for Yosef before eating bread. Again, this is an allusion. This is drash. But it can be an allusion to the halacha that one must not eat a meal within the hour of the time to pray without first praying. There's such a halacha that you shouldn't get involved in a meal if you're about to daven, because you might get distracted with the meal and miss davening. Especially mincha is easy to miss, especially during certain times of the year, right? Now, for instance, in the winter, when mincha can just pop up on you without you noticing 4 o'clock, 4:15, 4:30, whatever it is, the latest mincha, and you started doing something, at 3:30, and you're not done until 5. You're like, oops, I missed, I missed mincha. That could be a problem. Um, so that's like a sort of a drush idea from Rabbi Vidal Tzarfati. The brothers decorate their food gifts. These are minchas, and here they're preparing them. So, according to the Rashi, they're decorating them basically. Why? So perhaps this teaches that the appearance of food adds to the pleasure that it gives. There's such a concept in Kohelet. There's also such a concept in psychology, which is why eating with like your eyes closed or eating without looking at your food doesn't satisfy you as much as eating with full light and seeing your food. That's why eating in the dark is not as satisfying as according to the Gemara in Yoma 74b. Next verse. V'yishal lahem l'shalom, and then he comes back in. It's noontime, and he asks them how they're doing. What's their shalom? V'yomer hashalom avichem hazaken, and asks about the shalom of their father. Asher martem ha'odenu chai. He asks if he is still alive. And this foreigner points out, so some health advice from a 17th century doctor. Good health, of which healthy food is a contributing factor, depends on metabolism, a balance of opposing bodily functions. That is why good health is called shalom. Right, over and over again in this verse. What is your shalom? What is your father's shalom? Shalom means a balance. Health is balancing things. It's not running away, going to extremes one way or the other. But it's to have a good balance of things, foods, etc. All right. So then, chapter 43, verse 32. We're almost at the end here. Just a few more comments. Yeah. Yashimu lo levado v'lahem levadam. He's sitting on his own. They're sitting on their own. Right? These 11 brothers are and what at one table. He's sitting alone at his own table. L'mitzrim ha'ochlim ito, and the Egyptians are eating with him. And that's at the same time. Kilo yochlun ha'mitzrim lechol et ha'ivrim lechem. The Egyptians did not eat bread with the Jews. Kitoeva he lemitzrayim, because that was considered disgusting for the Egyptians. Let's just change a few words here. Okay. This is just a chiddush. Perhaps you take it for what it's worth. Perhaps it's disgusting for Egyptians to eat together with a Jew because shepherds are disgusting to them, and over again, the Jews are referred to as shepherds. And this segregation, by the way, makes Egypt more conducive than Canaan for the Jewish people to maintain to remain unique and to avoid assimilation. This may be a hint to the rabbinic laws governing bishul akum, the whole concept of making sure that a Jew cooks your food to stay within the Jewish community and not intermarry, etc., not to be influenced by Gentile culture. All of that is being hinted to here. And finally, chapter 43, verse 34, Visa mas'od me'et panav alehem, and he gives out portions to all of the brothers. Vaterev mas'ad binyamin mas'od kulam, and Binyamin's portion is greater than the rest. Excuse me. Okay. 5 times more. Chamesh yadot, v'yishtu v'yishkru imo, and but they drank and they got drunk with him. So let's focus on this drinking because it is strange for halakhic reasons and other reasons as well. They drink a little, says Rashi, because they're afraid of becoming intoxicated. But since they had become unaccustomed to alcohol from the time they decided to avoid wine since separating from Yosef, 22 years ago, they become drunk at this point. They're not, their constitution is unaccustomed to alcohol. Furthermore, the brothers become drunk because they're unprepared for the kind of drinking that occurs at Gentile royal banquets. Says this foreigner, the Torah is teaching you, as it does in Mishlei, to be prepared for various situations. You never know, so just be prepared for that possibility. Adjust accordingly. So perhaps this is Yosef's intent, to have the brothers let down their guards and act naturally. After all, Chazal teach that when wine comes in, secrets come out, and one can best learn of someone's true character bekoso, bekiso, bekaso, or through their cup, their wallet, and temper. The brothers certainly drink more than they are used to. Yosef could want them to become drunk in order to slip their money back into their sacks, or to slip the goblet into Binyamin's sack to activate his plans. So those are two different opinions. That's Rav Hirsch and Rav Chaim Kanievsky about why he wants them drunk. What does he want them to not see? What doesn't he want them to see? Right? So those are some ideas there. The brothers are allowed to drink this wine since there's not yet a decree forbidding stam yenam, wine produced by non-Jews. That's what this is. But there's no decree like that yet. Otherwise, they drink out of emas hamalchus, right? Emat hamalchut. There's fear of the king. But the brothers consider themselves as bnei Noach, and thus together with emat hamalchut, they feel it is proper for them to do this, to be drinking, to not sort of estrange themselves from their hosts. All right, and the last piece here. This is just an interesting Gemara in is it in Makot, I believe. Points out that this verse is the proof text for the idea that when Maser Sheni, that's the Maser that is supposed to be usually redeemed for money, and then that money spent for food in Yerushalayim. So when Maser Sheni food can still be redeemed in Yerushalayim, even if it becomes inedible by becoming tameh. They're probably asking, what are we talking about here? How's Yerushalayim? Where's Maser Sheni? Where's where's Tuma? We have none of these words are popping up. The answer is because of the word masaot. Masaot specifically means portions of food. So if that's the case, so when the Torah later on speaks about Maser Sheni and it talks about it becoming tameh, it's talking about food becoming tameh and the food still being able to be eaten. So that's just a little bit on the Parsha, and as you can see, there's quite a bit to say about. There's quite a bit there about food and nutrition and the history of food, technology, storage of food, and our behavior, especially in times of famine. But in terms of just understanding our economics, all of that is part and parcel of what we can learn from this week's Parsha. Thank you for joining me. Have a happy rest of your Hanukkah and a great rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thank you.